Grinder is dead, but the deck is not. Welcome to an update for the January 2021 OCG ban list of my Danger Dark World deck. I really love Dark Worlds, and when the Dangers came out, I instantly had to get them. So here's the deck. Jackalope at 2. You have nothing else to do with that. That's it. Maximum copies of Chuchi. Maximum copies of Mothman makes the entire deck work. Maximum copies of Chupacabra. He's terrible on the first hand, especially if there's nothing in the graveyard, but yeah, he works. You have nothing else to work with. Nessie, double Nessie, and of course Bigfoot. That's the entire Danger set. Then triple Snow and triple Brow makes the deck thin, fast. Speaking of deck thinning, we have one copy of Doki Pole, one copy of Spellcaster of Shadow Beast. And for floaters, we've got ourselves BW Zephyrus, and then the Strudo, and then there's Plague Spreader Zombie, and then there's our Fairy Tale Snow, and our Necro Shinobi. I've seen deck lists that run Plague Spreader. I've seen deck lists before that run Necro Shinobi, but never the two together. But I had space in my deck, and so, hey, let's run both. He's a V-Jump card, comes out into the field from the banished zone if he is used for a cost or an effect, and had this girl makes him go back to the field. He will be doing a lot of banish in this deck, weirdly enough. For the spell cards, there's a lot of hand traps now that work against this deck, and you have to bait them out, especially when it comes to Haru, or when it comes to Yuki, or Gamma, or whichever they would use. So triple tactics, it works. Draw 2. Card destruction. This is great for Maxi challenge. When an opponent uses Maxi, then they get to draw every time you summon on the field. Make them regret their decision. Foolish Burial, rather obvious for this deck. 2 copies of Allure of Darkness. As I mentioned, you banish a lot of cards, and this will work with Allure. Pot of Avarice, you're going to be sending a lot of cards into the graveyard, especially monsters from the extra deck, and you may want to bring them back to the extra deck. Makes you draw 2 cards. Dark World Deal can be searched by Dark World Snow. You can trigger the effects of the danger cards. You can send other stuff to the graveyard. Pretty straightforward. Terraforming searches for field spells, which are following. Gates of the Dark World. Banish a fiend from the graveyard. Discard a fiend from the hand. Draw 1 card. This deck has a lot of fiends. And of course, triple Chicken Game. Chicken Game, pay 1,000, draw a card, other stuff, but that doesn't matter. Zephyrus, pay 400, face up card on the field, bring it back to hand. You bring back Chicken Game, then you activate it again. Draw again. You draw a lot of cards. So that's the entire deck. Now, how are we going to win with this, especially with the FTK scenario? We've got ourselves Tempest Magician. Tempest Magician needs a spellcaster, and Fairy Tale Snow is a spellcaster. Our tuners, we have several in the deck, especially Necro Shinobi and or Plague Spreader, whichever gets on the field. There was no such thing as back then when she came out, there was no such thing as a once per turn for her burn effect. It was only her discard from hand to add spell counters on the field. Effect is remove all the spell counters on the field, minus 500 for each spell counter to the opponent. So you get enough spell counters, 16 spell counters, you multiply that by 500 and you get yourself 8,000 of damage. That's an instant win, FTK. And you do that with the help of Celine. Her effect is for every spell card in each graveyard, every spell card in the graveyard and on the field face up That's one spell counter. Tempest gets summoned with one instant spell counter. So you have at least 15 here, and then you have one here. Boom. Or, that's why you run two. Summon one Celine. Boom. Use them together with another monster. Bring out another copy of Celine. Effect is -3 spell counters. Summon a spellcaster from the graveyard. Do her effect again. Boom. And then if that's not enough, you discard hand cards, add more spell counters to the field. Boom. Explosion. What makes the deck run is that you can dump cards using Curios. Now, Curious is usually the target for hand traps. I've noticed she gets Haru'd a lot. And that's why I don't mind if she gets Haru'd, because what happens now is I just summon another monster and then I build Apollosa with just two materials. Doesn't matter, just two materials is usually enough to negate stuff. Especially with Tempest and Celine, they get negated by a hand trap. You will need Apollosa on your field. You'll need them. You'll need these girls there. But then there's a time when a hand trap isn't a monster. It's an actual trap, like infinite impermanence. So you got this evil swarm monster. Effect is you divert the target of a card and you divert it to him. So he's basically your simp for these girls. Then there's number 60, makes you draw 2 cards, then you discard 1 card. The downside is you cannot have your draw phase next turn. But the thing is, there is no next turn for this deck. It's an FTK. The rest of the deck is Levier. You banish a lot of monsters, might as well recycle them. Then there's IP Masquerena, really great card for making good monsters. Then there's Apprentice Magician. She's dark, she's a spellcaster, makes summoning Celine easier. Then there's our good old Nightmare Phoenix. Speaking of, there's Nightmare Griffin. Negates effects can only be activated on the field if they're connected to a link monster or to a link zone. So if they're not on the link, they will not work. Then there's Evermax. In case that this goes to shit, then that it doesn't work, then you just build a field that's really difficult to hit. Especially if you're going second and you have the chance to go to battle phase. And then there's Aryuja, makes you fix your hand. And then finally there's Zeroboros. I mentioned you will be banishing a lot of cards in this deck, and Zeroboros can essentially one-punch man your opponent. If you pump it up enough by banishing enough monsters from the graveyard, you will win using this card. Or if you really want to nuke the field, you summon this on one of the link zones, link markers, banish everything next turn, summon him to the center. Then he has a lot of attack. I mentioned that sometimes opponents' decks can be rather annoying, so you need a side deck. Now, just to be clear, there are 4 cards that are still unsure in the side deck, but the sure are Cosmic Cyclone, Red Reboot, which got limited, HFD, double copy of Twin Twister, Pancra, which got limited, Thunderbird, Bigfoot, and Walking Lancia, aka Chaos Hunter. She is the poor man's Lancia. Summoned to the field when your opponent special summons, but discard a card as cost, triggers the Dark Danger monsters, and your opponent cannot banish anything. She is a great card. So these 4 cards, I am still not sure what they're going to be. I still have to look for other stuff. Maybe a Nibiru if I could afford it. While we're at it, I had to secure a copy of Shadow Priestess Her effect is You tribute a dark monster on the field and you damage your opponent by 800. She is not once per turn. You just need to tribute 10 times. Just in case something goes wrong with the next ban list.